Gracious, and I'm studying biochemistry at Imperial College London. Climate change and the environment are relevant to my field of study, so I thought there was no one better to question than my uncle, Mr. Luke Gracious, who's been an environmental engineer for many years. So, my first question is, what inspired you to pursue this career on environmentalism and climate action?
Many years ago, I went to Australia. I was at a loss as to what I wanted to do. And this was something that interested me. I didn't know how much. And there was a course opening up at the University of Melbourne. It was one of the first batches that was doing a postgraduate degree in environmental science. And I chose to do that with law, which was environmental law, which was also starting up. And after the very first couple of months, I realized I had found my passion in life.
I think that's really amazing. Um, so I think today, if you go on social media or the news, you get so much information on increasing temperatures, rising CO2 levels, melting glaciers, and so on. However, I think it's difficult to get an overall macroscopic view on what the real issue with climate change is. So, with that in mind, what do you think will be the biggest issue that people will face over the next 50 years or so?
I'm going to put this in the form of the rule of threes, um, which is that yes, we have problems of feeding the world, we have problems of having water, and we have problems of our air quality, etc. The rule of threes is that if you don't have food, you can survive as a human for up to 3 weeks. If you don't have water, you have about 3 days before you die of thirst. If you don't have air, you've got all of 3 minutes. And so this is why we feel that the most urgent action is to have the ability to have oxygen or air. Um, Climate change effectively impacts our ability if we are putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and heating up the oceans, deforestation, we're taking out the lungs of the planet. This is our ability to take air. We have two lungs, the blue lung, which is the oceans, and the green lung, which are the forest. We have already removed 17% of the green lung and we are dismantling the blue lung. The blue lung works with the ability for carbon dioxide to dissolve in water, and this is impacted because hotter liquids dissolve less carbon dioxide and more acidic liquids dissolve less carbon dioxide. Our oceans are 30% more acidic than they were 100 years ago before the Industrial Revolution, and we're already talking about limiting temperature rise by 1.5 degrees. So we're accepting that it's going to be hotter. So that is why decarbonization is the number one priority for most of us. We're cutting out the 3 minutes that we've got to breathe.
You spoke of decarbonization and the oceans, and these are all global issues that affect really everyone. So, do you think that governments and agencies such as the UN are doing enough to address these challenges?
Yes and no. And I think the bigger problem is with decarbonization is the cost of decarbonization. We have a third of the planet or so which is not even connected to electricity on the grid. Our, our biggest forms of carbon emissions come from our generation of power, use of vehicles, etc. So a third of the planet doesn't actually contribute that much. The second third of the planet, which has the basics, are actually now all aspiring to get to having the international flights, having the bigger cars, having the air conditioners, having the washing machines, etc. So we are have a want for more energy, and unfortunately, we're also trying to cut down the emissions at the same time. The second problem we've got is that our solutions are so expensive that they're going to price out a lot of that third of the planet even further out of having electricity in the first place. So, although we want to do it, we also want to make the planet affordable. So, it is a conflicting set of requirements which the governments and the UN, etc., are faced with.
I do agree. I think the trade off between economic development versus climate action is very intricate and a difficult one to balance. The Paris Agreement, the 1.5 degrees Celsius that you mentioned, um, seeing the situation that there is today, do you think that the Paris Agreement and its goal of limiting temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius is actually attainable?
So I think the first question, the way I'd like to answer this question is with a bit of a stock take. In around 2020, we did a stock take when we shut down over COVID. And at that time, just before COVID, we believe we were putting 42 billion tons of greenhouse gases or carbon dioxide equivalent into the environment. The oceans and the forests, which are our blue and green lung that I spoke about, took out about 55% or 26. Um, well, about 26, so it's a bit more, 60% perhaps, 26 billion tons. The balance lands up going into the environment. If we meet all the Paris Agreement commitments, and that is if we meet them, we have committed to be at around 52 billion tons of net carbon dioxide emissions in 2030. Not that far away. But the lungs aren't getting any bigger. We're actually taking out more forest each day, and our oceans are getting more acidic and hotter. So the blue lung and the green lung are becoming smaller. Now, even if they maintain what they were doing, that still means we have a difference of 12 billion tons that's going to be increasing. What that impact has, we don't know, right? So definitely 1.5 is a target. Will other things take off? We don't know. Will the permafrost let off methane? We don't know. So, yeah, we have to take very, very rapid action on this.
I think to reach this goal, we definitely need to make changes in various energy sectors, waste management, etc. To reach this goal, there definitely needs to be a change and a less dependency on fossil fuel usage. So, what do you think of the renewable energy sector? How effective is it?
So, the key with the renewable energy sector is affordability. Renewable energy, the sun shines, we have solar energy. When the sun's off, we don't. So now we have what is called a capacity factor, or we need to have something that gives us energy when the sun's not shining. Unfortunately, we say, yeah, we can do some where we can do a hybrid with sun plus wind when the wind blows, but we don't know whether the wind's going to blow during the day or during the night. It's not like the wind will blow at night and the sun will shine during the day. So that is one of the problems we have. The second problem we have with the renewable energy sector, like in Australia and Queensland, where I live, is when the sun shines, the price of electricity drops because there's that much solar energy coming online. And that's been the history with Europe with wind, is when the wind blows, the price of electricity drops. So developing more of these are inhibited because we just don't have the economics, because the price when you can put solar on the grid, it's not, there's no money to be made. So people are struggling to do that. So and then there's the affordability factor. So by putting solar on the grid, what happens is that all the coal-fired power stations, the gas-fired power stations run at the same time, even if they run at a loss. And so what they do is they're dumping it maybe at a lower age, but to stay in business, once the sun shuts down, they start to charge exorbitant prices. And this is what internationally is known as the duck curve, where you have a high price till the sun starts and then the high price when the sun stops. So I think that renewable energy has its challenges, and the key challenge is going to be making it affordable to everybody, or we've got to have people who only work when the renewable energy is on. So you could have, say, water heating or stuff. So there are certain segments that you can do, and there are certain segments that need some form of energy storage, which will be the big change.
I think that's a challenging and definitely very important issue to address. And similarly to the change in and the new usage of renewable energy, what do you think about biofuel powered cars and electric vehicles?
So I think one of the things, I've never been a fan of electric cars. And the reason being, at least in its current format, the reason being that batteries have the lowest energy density and a very low energy density, which means we actually have a very, very heavy battery for the same amount, or our fuel tank is now very heavy. All our energy is based on the consumption of energy. Is That's why a truck has more air, takes more fuel than a car, is because it's heavier. Our whole technologies over the last 30 years have been towards lightening cars by making magnesium alloys, lightening planes, making them lighter. What's happening now is that by bringing batteries into cars, we're now putting a heavy fuel tank and going backwards. I think batteries have a wonderful place to play, especially in stationary sources. But when you put them onto a transport system, that becomes very difficult. The second problem, of course, is like with planes, which are a big consumer, it gets too heavy. So we pretty much don't see long distance planes or anything like that with batteries. So definitely for the energy sector, for the transport sector, I think biofuels are the way to go, provided we can produce enough.
That's interesting. Is there any other green technology or any other research that you have found fascinating?
I think all of it is, but I think the most promising ones, well, there are three actually. The first one is pumped hydro. I think that will be, it works with the environment. If you have naturally big changes in, altitude between two places, you could use, say, solar energy to pump water or a liquid up during the day and then let it pump down during the night. So you've actually got 24/7. Those technologies are getting better and better each day, but they also are far more reliable. It now is allowing things like wind and solar to be baseload energy, which means they can generate for 24/7. The other one I really think is great is algae. It's an untapped source. It's something that you and I have worked on together. Algae take up carbon dioxide at 6 times the speed of trees. The best biofuels we have, like miscanthus and fast growing crops, do about 20 tons of biomass per hectare. Algae is already doing 50. If we go to GM, it's even higher, genetically modified. As we're getting to understand algae and give them, put them on steroids with nitrates and phosphates, we're getting more. We're looking at putting, solar powered lighting onto algae to give it 24/7. I think that's a definitely one of the ones of the future. And the third one, of course, is material science. We got into nanotechnologies now. We've got into better materials for batteries. I mean, even technologies like solar are getting redundant in, what solar technology was 10 years ago and what it is today. It's so much more efficient than it was. So that's where the exciting part of environmental technology is. I think it's going to be one of the biggest sectors in the world if it already isn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think biotechnology as a sphere is a very interesting place to be right now, and there's a lot of research and potential there. I'm gonna divert from the energy aspect and go into waste generation, which is also a very big issue for the environment. Could you comment on fast fashion and the implications of textile waste?
So textile wastes are really interesting because we have generally designed these wastes to survive and not to degrade. We've even got most of our clothes today are a mix of polyester, which is an oil based fiber, and natural fibers, which is things like silk and cotton. Silk and cotton are biodegradable, polyester fibers are not. So, to recycle them, you now have a problem where one part of your fabric is biodegradable and the other part isn't. So, then to repurpose it, it's very, very hard. The second issue is that a lot of people, if you're going for fashion, they want to look better. So, they're looking for a more uniform raw material, which is what virgin materials are. And so, what we're doing is now getting a lot of it goes into the waste landfills, etc. In fact, textiles are the biggest waste after plastics, and we can't do anything unless we have a mindset which says, look, we should charge more for virgin material, or alternatively, be more clever in our thinking when we design these things so that they can be recycled. Because if we mix the fabrics, we like the polyesters, polyester cotton mixes, it's in one shirt or one pair of jeans. It's a mix. You can't separate it out.
Got it. Yeah, I do think that fast fashion and all of this is such a pertinent issue right now where you see that people are buying more than ever before. And staying on that issue, how do you think that people's perception and approach to climate change has changed over the past 2 decades? Do people give it more importance now?
Yes, I mean, I think all of us, if you're looking at it, it's consumerism, it's about profitability. All the big fashion brands are about selling more. So unfortunately, it's not like, look, you've got one pair of jeans and you're going to have that for the whole year. You have multiple fashions, multiple things. So the more fashions you have, the more cloth you have. And it's not just on the amount of raw materials, it's impacts on the amount of water that it takes to do this, the wastewaters, etc. So yes, we definitely have an issue because our consumerism has told us to own more. That's the first thing. Your second question, we're seeing weather events that we've never seen before. We are seeing record highs, record lows. We're seeing snow in places we've never seen it before. We're seeing floods like never before. And I've talked about the fact that, I mean, the actual um, Gulf streams, all these, the ocean currents have slowed down, which directly control climate. A hotter sea means we have more evaporation. That means our storms have more water, they have more power. But the biggest change is that I think every generation wants to leave a better world. One day, our generation is going to have to hand over the keys of this planet to yours. This is a fact of every generation has done that. And our problem today is that I think most of us who started out our careers and saw a lot of senior management and very senior management dealing with issues like profit and bottom line are now talking legacy, a very different approach to it completely. We're seeing a lot of legislation come in place with carbon legislation. I mean, Australia's seen the safeguard mechanism come in last year. CBAM, which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism with Europe, comes into play in about 2 years' time or a year's time, 25, 26. Japan has had the sixth forum, which has been in touch for a while. These are all very draconian measures to cut down carbon emissions. So definitely there is an awareness because we can see the writings on the wall. I mean, it doesn't take blind Freddy to see the carving of the icebergs, to see these sorts of, the storms, etc. So yeah, there has been a change, and it's now the corporate world is also coming to the party of saying we need to do something.
I think all the evidence on climate change really shows urgency to rectify the solution. And I would like to end by asking, what do you think my generation, um, or how my generation should tackle the issue of climate change?
I think the first thing is this is that every parent wants to give your generation the best life. I mean, every generation wants to leave a better world. This is what, I take India for example, is people will sacrifice their life savings to give their kids the education. My parents did the same for me. Um, I think that the biggest problem we've got at the moment is the consumerism and the very fact that there is a lack of understanding. And I talked about the sort of an alcoholic as an example. Having a little bit of alcohol might be a great thing, but when you are an alcoholic, if you do not know you have a problem or the magnitude of your problem, you can't solve it. You will always go back to it. I don't think that anyone has really taken the time to go and say, this is the magnitude of the problem. It's the education of knowing just how bad it is. What do we have as our resources to get across the bridge to the next 10 years in the transition? We're not even talking of saving the planet. We're talking about transitioning from where we are with a carbon based economy to a green economy. How do we do that to give you all a better world chance and the tools of survival? So, if your generation knows exactly how bad the problem is, based on hard facts and figures, then you can influence your parents to change the way that they think, what is important to you. That is it an education? Is it a better planet? Is a planet that actually is inhabitable? So that I think is the knowledge of knowing the magnitude of the problem is what I've done with the first two books, which is The Devil's Prayer, No Shadow Without Light, especially the second one. How bad is the problem? Our stock take today.
I think that's a very thought provoking message and something that we can all think about. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Tanya. It's been a pleasure to be on 10 questions with Tanya.